Welcome, everyone. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. Connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect. So on Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. Okay, welcome again, everyone, to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Additionally, all attendees are participating in listen-only mode. We encourage you to post any questions that you may have during the conversation into the Q&A box. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed on Friday to all who registered. And all resources that you see shared as links in the chat will be compiled and shared in the same follow-up email. Finally, we'll be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during closing and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Additionally, before we begin, I would like to call your attention to some of our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Next week on April 5th, we start the month off with a funder-to-funder conversation on learning ovations, transforming literacy outcomes in the classroom, community, and home, followed at 3 p.m. by building equitable relationships between home and school, learning from new data and innovative districts, co-sponsored by Learning Heroes. The following week, a Crucible of Practice Salon will share information on engaging public libraries as key coalition partners at 12:30. And on April 19th, we invite you to join us for the role of philanthropy in building children's savings accounts. Information and registration for these sessions will be posted in the chat box now, and we hope you can join us. And joining you now is Ginger Young, CEO of Book Harvest, a children's literacy nonprofit based in Durham, North Carolina, and a senior consultant for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to be with you today for the webinar, Children's Savings Accounts, Building Wealth, Aspirations, and Prosperity for Children and Families. Today, together, we will delve into the compelling and exciting topic of children's savings accounts, referred to as CSAs, and the ways that CSAs can build wealth, aspirations, and prosperity for children and families. Members of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading Network are united, as we know, in our commitment to breaking the cycle of generational poverty and to ensuring that every child has the support they need to succeed in school and to graduate prepared for a career, college, and active citizenship. We will explore together today the profound ways in which CSAs promote educational expectations for children from low and moderate income households, contribute to improved educational experiences and outcomes, and support parents in envisioning bold goals for their children. CSAs are two-generation powerhouses, putting aspirations for college within reach for children and families who have historically been left behind. My colleagues today will tell you more, and I hope they will help you think about how your community might add CSAs to your grade level reading toolkit. Let me briefly introduce our speakers today. First, we have two presenters. Professor William Elliott is a leading researcher in the fields of college savings accounts, college debt, and wealth inequality. Shaped by his personal roots in poverty in a small steel mill city in Pennsylvania, he challenges individual beliefs and cultural values that surround funding for college, student debt, inequality, systemic patterns of poverty, and educational justice. Willy has published in numerous journals, and his most recent book is Making Education Work for the Poor: The Potential of Children's Savings Accounts. Carl Rist is an independent consultant from Durham, North Carolina, who specializes in asset building, economic opportunity, and financial security strategies designed to benefit residents in low-income communities. Carl's clients include the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, the Richmond Memorial Health Foundation, the Indiana Institute for Working Families, and the Crisis Assistance Ministry. Previously, Carl spent almost 30 years at Prosperity Now, formerly the Corporation for Enterprise Development, working on a variety of strategies to expand economic opportunity and help lower-income households build wealth. And we have 4 discussants with us today. I'm so excited to introduce them to you. Patty Grant has served the Community Foundation of Wabash County in Indiana since 1989. Under Patty's leadership, the foundation's assets grew from $15,000 in 1990 to over $77 million today. Patty served as the project director for the first Lilly Endowment Community Scholarship Program and the Community Alliance Partnership to Promote Education Initiative. As executive director of the Community Foundation of Wabash County, Patty led the foundation's team in developing a scholarship program to help utilize Indiana's College Choice 529 plan to build college-going identities and assets for post-secondary education. Munir Karcher-Ramos is the inaugural director of the Office of Financial Empowerment at the City of St. Paul, which exists to advance economic democracy that shares prosperity with all St. Paul residents. His team at the City of St. Paul advances programs and policies that address the racial wealth divide and extractive economic practices, including College Bound St. Paul, the citywide college savings account program starting at birth, guaranteed income programs, fair housing strategies, worker and community ownership approaches, fines and fees justice, and more. He is a Children and Family Fellow at the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Christina McLean grew up in Durham, North Carolina, and graduated from Elizabeth City State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting. She currently works in finance at Duke University. When the older of her 2 children, Lauren, was born in 2013, Christine enrolled her in the 5-year Book Babies program of Book Harvest. In October 2021, upon its kickoff, Christina enrolled Lauren in Book Babies Bright Futures, a $500 college and career savings program for all participants in and graduates of Book Babies. As you will hear today, Christina is a passionate advocate of children's savings accounts. Colleen Quinn is the president and CEO of the Alphonse Scholarship Foundation, which awards a $500 grant at birth to every Maine resident baby for their future education after high school. By the beginning of 2022, the program had invested over $65 million in more than 130,000 Maine children. ASF works with families and partners across the state to increase student aspirations and outcomes through educational messaging and by encouraging family savings for college. Prior to ASF, Colleen was the founding executive director of the Senator George J. Mitchell Scholarship Research Institute. Her earlier career included serving as Assistant Attorney General and running her own education law practice. She serves on and leads numerous boards supporting the field of children's savings accounts. And now I would like to turn to Carl Rist, our first presenter, for an overview of CSAs. Welcome, Carl.
Thanks so much, Ginger, and thanks everyone for joining us for today's webinar, and of course to those who will be listening at a later date. As Ginger said, my name is Carl Rist, and it has been my absolute pleasure to be part of the launching and growth of the children's savings account field over the last 2 decades. First on staff with Prosperity Now, and more recently in my role as a consultant with the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. We have an awesome lineup of panelists today. So my job as the opening presenter is really to do some level setting. I know that some of you are already familiar with children's savings accounts, but for others, this may be a new conversation. So I want to start by giving everyone a high-level overview of CSAs, what they are, how they work, why they're important, and just how big the children's savings account field is here in 2022. So first, what are children's savings accounts? So I think it's worth noting at the outset that a CSA is not a term of art. So there's not one specific definition as there is with, say, an IRA or a 401k account, but rather CSAs include a range of closely related initiatives that all embody some key features. So first, CSAs are long-term savings or investment accounts for children or youth with a focus on the long term. Many CSA programs establish accounts when children are born. So we're talking about long-term savings or investment accounts that may be open for as many as 18 years. Second, CSAs typically are designed to help participants save for a specific long-term asset. And in most cases, and you'll hear more about this from the panelists later on the webinar, most CSA programs help children and their families to save for post-secondary education. Third, what's unique about CSAs, and in some ways what distinguishes them from, a children's savings account you might find at your local bank or credit union, is that CSAs, is the accounts receive one or more monetary incentives to help the savers save or the accounts to grow. And this may come in the form of an initial deposit to help establish the account. It may come in the form of savings matches to encourage the participants in their account. And it may come in the form of behavioral incentives or benchmark deposits to help encourage specific kinds of behaviors, like doing well in school, taking a financial education course, or signing up for a direct deposit into the account. Let's go to the next slide. So why are children's savings accounts so important? Willy Elliott may say more about this after I talk, but CSAs are very much built on theory and research about what it takes for families to get ahead and stay ahead. As you probably know, much of our social policy in this country is focused on helping households to have enough income to make it month to month. But a new wave of researchers led by Michael Sheridan at Washington University in St. Louis and the author of Assets and the Poor have pointed out that households get ahead and stay ahead by having assets, wealth, or resources that they own and control. In fact, while wealth and income are essentially all forms of money, the reality is that assets, and I mean things like savings accounts, mutual funds, stocks and bonds, retirement accounts, they function differently than income. So for example, assets are flexible and can be used both for long-term investments in important assets like homes, education, and small businesses, but they can also be used as a cushion to help families cover a short-term emergency. Another way to think about this is that assets are durable and can be passed from one generation to the next in a way that you can't pass your paycheck on to your kids, right? Yet while assets are important, critically important for success in our market economy, the ugly reality in 21st century America is that the distribution of wealth in this country is highly unequal, much more unequal than even our income distribution, which is also highly regressive. So as the graph on your screen shows, according to the most recently available data, the wealth, and I mean by that assets minus liabilities, of the average or median white household is more than $170,000, which is 10 times greater than the median wealth of Black households and 8 times greater than the median wealth of Hispanic households. So this is a staggering level of inequality. And there's been much talk in recent years in the political scene nationally about the huge racial wealth divide we see. So with this staggering level of inequality, building wealth is a critical avenue for building hope and opportunity for all families in our country. Let's go to the next slide. You'll hear much more from our panelists today later about this, but basically, children's programs are set up and managed by public or nonprofit organizations. These programs open an account for children or youth, and the most common type of account is either a regular bank savings account or a 5 to 9 college savings account. In most cases, CSA programs focus on a particular target, or I'm sorry, in some cases, programs focus on a particular target population, but more common are programs in which all children in a geographic area, whether that's a neighborhood, city, or state, are all eligible, and in many cases, even automatically enrolled. And we'll talk more about that as well later. As I mentioned earlier, these programs provide one or more incentives to help the accounts grow. Again, initial deposits, savings matches, or other monetary rewards. And given the wealth inequality we just talked about, another common practice is to provide some kind of progressive incentives so that low-income kids receive greater benefits and grow greater wealth. Along with the account and the incentives, CSA programs often provide some kind of basic financial education to help children and families understand how to save, how to manage their account, and how to wisely use their account proceeds. And then at the end, the beneficiaries have a nest egg they can use at age 18 to invest in an asset. And again, as I mentioned earlier, for the vast majority of CSA programs, this means being able to help pay for college or post-secondary education. So that's just a kind of quick scan. And again, we'll go much deeper with the panelists as we on the second half of our webinar. So the last thing I just want to do on the last slide is say a little bit about the children's savings account field. So the field has grown rapidly since launching as a demonstration back in 2002. As of the end of 2021, there were more than 100 programs, big and small, across 36 states, and those programs had established more than 1 million CSAs for kids. So we're getting into some real numbers with CSAs here. And as you can see on the map, and as on the left there, the darker states are states with a larger number of accounts. On the map on the right, you'll see larger bubbles for larger clusters of account activity. Much of the CSA activity has been in the Northeast and the West, in states like Maine, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, where every child or every kindergarten student receives a CSA. But there's also been a lot of activity at the local level in places like the Bay Area, the Twin Cities, and across Michigan and Indiana. And you'll be hearing from a number of those programs today on our panel. So that's just a quick sense of like the size of the field and where activity is located. I want to stop here and turn things over to Willy Elliott, who's going to talk more about what we know about the impact of CSAs. So I'll hand it back to you, Ginger, or right on to Willy.
Right on to Willy. Willy, welcome.
Let's do it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to have this chance to talk to everyone. Go to the next slide. Go to the next slide. All right, before I start, again, I want to say thank you for letting me come and talk. As an academic, sometimes it's really nice to be able to have a chance to talk to people in the field, doing things, actually making things happen, as opposed to going to some of the kind of boring conferences that academics are so prone to. So thank you again for this opportunity. I'm going to blow through some slides pretty fast. And so if you have questions, we'll have time in the Q&A. I put a lot of words in these slides, both for your sake, so that you would have them afterwards, and probably also for my own comfort. But I like for people to have the information. So if I don't cover everything, certainly feel free to ask questions. If afterwards you'll see in another location, there's references to all the findings that we have. If you need a paper or access to a paper, shoot me an email or Ginger, and I will make sure you get the article that you're looking for. So quickly here on this slide, we look at the 4 stages of what may be called the opportunity pipeline. Melinda Lewis and myself wrote a book, and in that book, we call it the opportunity pipeline, which is early childhood, school years, college years, post-college years. One of the great things about children's savings accounts, sometimes called children development accounts, don't get scared by the name, they're the same thing, is that they extend across the child's life course and really even beyond their post-college years into retirement age. At least they have the potential to do that, as hypothesized by Michael Sheridan. And so there are very few interventions that actually are able to extend across the life course. Next slide. Next slide. And we'll go through a few of those slides, say early childhood school. This gives you a breakdown of where the findings are at. And by no stretch of the imagination am I covering every article written around CSAs. And I'm really narrowing it down here to literature around CSAs effects on educational outcomes, given our emphasis here on 3rd grade reading and on college outcomes and poverty more broadly. So I focused the literature around there. So there is more to be said. One of the things we see in the early childhood is positive effects of children's savings accounts on social emotional development. One of the interesting things about CSA field as well, in as much as Carl told you and explained to you that like how wide ranging it is, how much growth there's been over the last 10 years around children's savings accounts, how they spread across the country, with Colleen talking about 130,000 accounts being in Maine alone. There's also a fairly large body of research around CSAs, which is kind of unique within financial aid type of interventions, largely because things like student debt, it's very hard to randomize student debt. You can't say you get random debt, you don't. And so mostly what you have is correlational evidence. Here, we're going to talk about both correlational evidence, but also some causal evidence. And this is one of the cases in which the Center for Social Development, Michael Sheridan, who is kind of the godfather of assets, runs the Center for Social Development. And they did this study called CEDOK in Oklahoma, where they randomly assigned children to having a savings account. And one of the effects they've seen is that these accounts have positive effects on children's social emotional development, which we know is a strong predictor of children's academic success early on and then all the way through to college. And so we think these are really important effects. The effects are strongest among low-income families. And you'll find that in pretty much all the research where that's looked at around CSAs is that the effects are strongest among the low-income families. Next slide. And I will be fast on some of these because I want to spend some time on some other ones. Next slide. All right, so parental practices. This is a more recent article, also from the randomized controlled trial. And research shows that the positive parenting practices are associated with more positive school adjustments, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, that link between parental practices and kind of children's behavior and success. Despite providing no direct intervention practices, CDOK findings indicate that CSAs reduce punitive parenting and promote positive parenting interactions. And so they theorize the CSAs may increase parents' perceived levels of economic safety, enhance their optimism concerning the long-term development of their child, improve parents' mental health, and therefore reduce the negative impacts on mental health conditions on parenting. Something I'll get into more as we move along, but it's just that idea that CSAs are basically at this point a small dollar account. And so the effects we see, and you can't access the money until you reach college age, right? And so even in that case, it still has positive effects on things like parental practices, even though they're not receiving the money now. It's just that positive outlook that the families have for their kids and for their futures that helps them change how they parent. One of the things we're not going to mention in these slides is that it also has a positive effect on maternal depression, right? And so they have a more positive attitude about their lives, about their futures, even though they're not receiving money out of these accounts currently, not until the future. It's just this idea that by providing them with this stronger hope for their kids' futures, it creates better parental practicing, less maternal depression, better social emotional development for kids. Next slide. I have to be faster on the next ones. All right. So academic achievement, and Patty Grant's going to talk to you later. In a lot of the research I'm sharing here, not all, but a lot of it is from Promise Scholars, and it's around academic achievement. And you see here a number of studies listed where we're seeing positive effects on being in Children's Savings Account program. And in the case of Promise Scholars, it's unique because it also has a scholarship component where some money is put into the accounts early on from a scholarship fund. And we've seen positive effects, particularly on math. It's more mixed around reading. So the effects are strongest around CSAs and children's math. And again, the effects are strongest for the low-income families, which this is an intervention really designed for low-income families, which it shouldn't be shocking to us that the findings are strongest among them, because people who have lots of money, their expectations about going to college are pretty set in stone and pretty solid, that they'll have the money and they'll be able to go. And so these accounts really help those lower income kids for whom there might be doubt in their minds about whether college is possible without an intervention or strategy like this. Next slide. We've also seen, and this has been more of the correlational data and secondary data sets, but also we've seen some, like again in Patty's program and other programs, where CSAs affect children's expectations for going to college. I want to just spend a little more time here, and then for the other slides, I'll reduce my time. We coined this idea around college-bound identity, and really college-bound identity is based on identity-based motivation theory, and which is really pioneered by Daphne Ozerman, and we've just borrowed from her work to think about it in the context of CSAs. And identity-based motivation says for someone to have an identity that they act on, there's three things that are important. Salient, something that's far off, feels close. Difficulty is normal. When we come up against a problem, like a math problem or whatever else, and it's difficult, we don't feel like it means quit. It means this is normal. It's okay that it's hard to save. It's okay that it's hard to do math, and we continue to push forward. People who have that kind of identity are the ones who tend to act on that identity. Group congruence. People like me save. People like me go to college. CSA programs are largely being structured around these kinds of principles, where you make something like college feel close. You provide them with a strategy for paying for college, which makes college feel more realistic, more possible, and not overwhelming. And in group congruence, and states like Maine, where every kid is born is receiving an account. They sit in the classroom, they can talk to each other. They all know, the student knows, the parent knows, the teacher knows. These kids all have accounts, and the expectation for them is going to college, and it builds this kind of identity around people like me saving to go to college. Next slide. And those are really important constructs. I hope we can talk a little bit more in a Q&A about. With regard to parental communication, this research might not have been the best research to present on here. There's other research that shows that CSAs actually increase communication amongst parents and child around CSAs. This research here specifically talks about kids who talk with their parents about their accounts and about going to college are far more likely to have positive outcomes, right? And so an important piece that CSAs bring is this opportunity for families to begin to talk about college with their kids and amongst their peers. And this makes college in educational outcomes and having a strong identity about going to college much more likely. Next slide. We also seen positive effects with regard to CSAs and parental expectations for their child. So children, parents of children in CSA programs are much more likely to think of their kids are going to college, which goes back to that idea, which we don't have evidence on as of yet, we haven't done the research on it, what we need to, is on this idea of building this, once everybody in the group has a CSA, you build this among teachers and everybody else's expectation that kids are going to college. And we've seen this early on in parents that, and this is these findings around expectations are consistent and strong throughout all the research. And again, all the effects are strongest among the lower income families. Next slide. So this truly is an intervention for low income families. Next slide. Combating will. This comes to that idea that I was talking about, that not everybody who expects to go to college goes to college, right? And so one of the things, we don't only want kids, we want kids to act on their identity. And so kids who feel like college is something they need to act on now are more likely to go in the future, that group groups, all these things, right? And this evidence here, and I'll just go quickly over this, this idea of wilt is this idea that some kids expect to go to college but don't go to college. And when they have CSAs, they're much more likely to actually act on their identity and go to college. Next slide. We see that even with small amounts of savings, kids are much more likely to enroll and graduate in college. This is cross-sectional data and I don't present this evidence here, but in Italy, they did a randomized control trial because in America, the programs are relatively new. And even though there's 130,000-ish kids in Maine who have accounts, they're not yet in college age, even though I can promise scholars in the next year or two, we'll have kids going to college in some other programs. They're starting to reach college age. So much of the research around college enrollment, college graduation has been on secondary data using proxies for children's savings accounts, like whether or not kids have money set aside for college. And we've seen strong effects with that respect, again, among the lower income families. And again, in Italy, they have done a randomized control trial now, looking at older kids who had CSAs and have found strong effects on both college enrollment and persistence in college. Next slide. Next slide. I'll mention quickly here, one of the great things about CSAs, again, is that they reach across the lifespan. And if we're ever going to really make education pay, it's important that kids who get a degree get the positive effects of having a degree. And we don't see that among low-income families. They tend to have poorer outcomes compared to other kids with a degree with more money. And so CSAs are a way to help balance that. One way they do that is they increase kids' likelihood of investing in assets when they get out. And so they're more likely to have stocks, bonds, rental property, and things like that if they have a CSA early on. Next slide. And that's extremely important to link those things together. And here's some of the programs listed that we use data from to draw some of these conclusions. We've had a lot more data, access to a lot more data from a lot more programs, and the findings look similar to what we show here. Next slide. So quickly, in state 529s in 2013, only 0.3%, 3% of households in the bottom half of the wealth distribution had 529 accounts. And so basically, there's not a lot of people saving for college, even though the trends are shifting. I think that message is shifting where we used to think of college as something you start thinking about when you're in high school. There's a lot more emphasis on thinking about it early. Now, not surprisingly, the wealthy families are making this shift faster than low-income families. The message is getting to them first. Opt-in CSA programs, opt-in quickly, are programs you have to enroll in. You're not automatically enrolled. For example, in year one, Promise, Indiana and Wabash County was able to enroll 59% of eligible students in year one, 33% in year two, 18% in year three, and 21% in year four. Opt-out CSA programs and CWK experimental parents and Trinity Grid are automatically enrolled in the state 5 to 9 plan and granted $1,000 deposit in 99% of the families. So the basic takeaway from that is if you're doing an opt-in program, not everybody's going to be involved. If you do an automatic enrollment program, you're pretty much going to have everybody in. They have to opt out not to participate, and very few people do that, usually religious beliefs around banking. Some people would drop out, but that's about it. Next slide. What we see here is that the yellow line is the contributions of the family. The blue line is the earnings off of those contributions. Because this money is put into interest earning accounts and also investment vehicles, they earn money on above and beyond what they put in. And you can see the kind of continual growth. And this is during the period of the Great Recession. And so it falls in here, and we still see steady trends in growth with CSAs. Next slide. I'm just going to go to the next slide, please. I'm going to skip over that slide. Here we see that among low-income families, the initial deposit is the orange, and it makes up a larger portion of the overall assets, which suggests to us that the amount we put in as far as for building assets is really important. Like higher income families are going to contribute far more of their own money because they have more money to do that. And so that's going to make up the bulk of their account. For low income families, that initial deposit we put in there really matters for them building assets. What we've shown you earlier is that even if they're not able to build large amounts of assets in these accounts, they have a lot of positive effects on their social development, academic achievement, all those things. But there also is this asset building component that we want. And what we can do, programs like Patty's, where they're putting scholarships in and thinking outside the box beyond families' own contributions, are really important to growing the asset pool for low-income families. Next slide. This basically says, this is a study done by Shapiro in his camp, the Assets and Social Policy Institute, which the name changed, I forget what it is now. Anyhow, they find that if you have a progressive account, that you can really have an effect on wealth inequality. The Black-white wealth gap and also the Latino-white wealth gap shrinks when you put sizable amounts of money into CSA accounts. Next slide. I'm going to finish gender in plenty of time. Families do save in CSAs. Few save percent with one or more contributions. In opt-out programs, it's 8% to 30%. In opt-in programs, it's 40 to 46%. One of the reasons that opt-out programs are lower is because everybody's included, right? So in the opt-in programs, only those who choose to participate, and in the opt-out programs, all families are included. More dilemma, low-income families have little money left over after they pay for basic needs. This harsh accounting has led some researchers, policymakers, and educators to reject the idea of diverting money from low-income-based programs such as cash assistance or need-based financial aid to CSAs. I think this is a fundamental mistake and something where my research and thinking has really grown over time in two ways. The first point is the beginning part of asset work in CSAs was really to show that low-income people can save. And we found with randomized control trials, yes, poor people can and do save. However, not surprisingly, they save small amounts of money because they have small amounts of money to save, which suggests to us, again, that initial deposit and finding additional ways to put assets into those accounts is really important. Once you have a CSA in place, you have the infrastructure for third-party donations, you have the infrastructure for community donations, you have foundations can donate, many different people can put money into that, federal governments can put money into that, whatever else. The second part of that is this wrong-headed idea that low-income people need money to eat now, and that should be our priority, and worry about their futures later. And I will tell you, as someone who grew up homeless for large periods of my life, and who grew up really poor, and many of you have these experiences, whether it be your immigration experience or whatever else, that the thing that really drives you through is not the fact that you can eat today, and maybe you'll eat tomorrow. It's that future. It's the belief that tomorrow can be better, and lets you suffer undue things and helps you to continue to push forward. We cannot do policy anymore like we've done for the last 30 decades of income first, assets later. Kids need futures. Poor kids need belief in their futures, and assets are about their futures, and it provides them a tangible link to their future. It allows them to begin to purchase their college while they're a kid. It allows them to purchase their future home while they're a kid, right? That's what assets do. They give you tangible hope for the future, and that's why they're so important. Doesn't mean it's an either or, it's a combination. We have to get out of this mindset of fighting for income and not assets, or assets and not income. It really is a combination of those two. And Munir has a beautiful RCT that's getting ready to start, where they have guaranteed income, a CSA, they get targeted deposits, they get financial literacy, and we build that all into one. And that's really kind of where the asset field, I think, will go in the future, is combining income and asset strategies to really finally end poverty and cycles of poverty. Next slide. I am done. I was fast. Hopefully we'll have Q&A. I can get more into this, but thank you.
Willy, thank you so much. That was just a mind-blowing amount of very compelling information. And I love what you said at the end. The belief that tomorrow can be better is a really strong and important thing to pay attention to here. I just want to reassure everybody, Willy was, I saw the number of slides he had, and I reminded him he had a certain slice of time. He came in under time, congratulations. But as a result, some of those slides went whizzing past, and I just want everybody to know that the slide deck you'll receive in the follow-up materials will include this treasure trove of resources and findings from Willy. So if you kind of had to skim past them as he went through on time, know that you can come back to them, and there's a lot of information there. It is my utter delight that we have 4 discussants with us here today to share case studies of their CSA experiences. I want to welcome first Patty Grant of the Community Foundation of Wabash County to talk about her work with the Early Award Scholarship Program. Patty?
Thank you. I want to thank the Campaign for Grade Level Reading for inviting me to present. I also want to thank the Mott Foundation and recognize our donors and Dr. Elliott that have really made our progress possible. We're excited about our CSA model. It really is about innovating an alternative method for delivering post-secondary scholarships. Our CSA model provides a platform for students and families to engage in children's savings accounts in a manner that's not solely dependent upon family savings. Students and families engage and participate with their CSA through the students' in-school learning and in-school achievements. Here's how our program works. We use the CSA platform to award small scholarships frequently to students in grades 4 through 8 who complete 100% of their assignments at a 70% proficiency. What do I mean by frequently? We award small scholarships every quarter. And it's important to note that we award these award scholarships for learning behaviors that our teachers have told us will lead to in-school success. So rather than providing a $20 scholarship for a test score at the end of the year or end of the semester, we award a $10 scholarship into a CSA account for each student who completes their schoolwork in math or reading and language arts. We also award a small scholarship when students set adaptive learning goals with their teacher's guidance, and then another scholarship award when they meet them. As children progress through our program, we shift our focus from awarding academic achievement to college prep activities, such as completing a college cost estimator, or visiting a campus, or writing a college application essay. We also use the CSA platform to match small contributions that the family makes to their Students Indiana College Choice 529 account. We believe that our CSA model of early award scholarships is a great complement to traditional end-of-year public school scholarship awards. We also believe that they address some of the limitations that traditional scholarships cannot do. Unlike traditional scholarships, as Willy has pointed out, early award scholarships have the potential to incentivize and encourage early learning. They have the potential to influence a student's identity as a college-bound student. And we believe that our CSA program reaches low-income families. We know from our experience with traditional scholarships that far too often children from low-income families are not in our traditional scholarship applicant pool because they have decided early on that post-secondary education wasn't attainable for them. If a student participates in our program and completes all the schoolwork and all the college prep activities and earns the minimal matches in family savings, they could earn a total award of $1,000 over the 5-year program. The early award scholarships are invested just like the 529 funds, and they are available for payment directly to the institution of the student's choice up until the age of 26. As Willy mentioned, a critical component of the program is communications. We hypothesize that if assets are to change the way children think about their futures, if assets are to change their orientation to learning and opportunities in education, that the students and the families have to know that they have them. So we spend a good amount of energy devising ways to communicate with parents to recognize students' participation in their scholarship achievements. We do this through public events at basketball games and in-school events and classroom events. The families have online access to early award scholarship funds, but the Community Foundation goes the extra mile by sending written progress reports each quarter to the student to tell them how they're earning scholarships for their post-secondary and after high school education. We also send scholarship fund statements to the parents. We do this as well on a semi-annual basis. We take measures to encourage our teachers to talk to their students about their early award scholarship funds. Our program has been generously supported by the Mott Foundation, our donors, and our public schools. Our partnership with the public schools is critical. As a part of that partnership, we pay a stipend to one teacher in each building in each grade level. The teachers are helpful in many ways. They help us enroll students, they keep us and parents and students informed. Our goal has always been to enroll more than 65% of our target population in the Early Award CSA program, which we have very nearly accomplished. Again, I want to thank the Campaign for Green Level, Dr. Elliott and the Mott and our donors for allowing us to do this wonderful work. Thank you, Ginger.
Thank you, Patty. That is really so inspiring. And we'll come back to ask a little more about the details of your program shortly. Next, we want to hear from Munir Karcher-Ramos about his work with College Bound St. Paul.
Thank you so much. Appreciate being here today and being part of this robust conversation on children's savings accounts and what that means for wealth building. So again, Munir, I'm the Director of Financial Empowerment, City of St. Paul, part of Mayor Carter's leadership team. And prior to becoming mayor, Mayor Carter was the Director of Early Learning for the Minnesota Department of Education. And as he went around the state and connected with folks, he realized that a theme kept coming up with teachers that he was talking to, and they often referred to the kindergarten surprise, right? So really thinking if we only knew, about this kid sooner, we'd be able to, support them so that they aren't so far behind as they enter kindergarten. It was that coupled with the research that Dr. Elliott walked through that really said that there's too much to know. We know too much not to do anything. And it was with that Mayor Carter really wanted to focus on launching a children's savings account program in the city of St. Paul. So during his inaugural speech, he said that we want to be the first universal city-run CSA program that starts at birth. So we are a CSA program that starts at birth. We launched in 2020 and with a $50 seed deposit for every baby born in our city, and really wanted it to be a city that is a college-bound city, that is a place where that is the expectation, that is sort of the groundwork, that is the possibility that we want to plant, with every single kid in the city of St. Paul and their families. So to date, 2 years into the program, we have over 7,000 children who've been enrolled in the program, over $820,000 in savings, which includes seed deposits, milestone earnings, as well as family savings and contributions. Right now, our average size of our account is $119 or $69 above that initial $50 seed deposit, and our largest account now, 2 years in, is just over $2,200. As we think about our work and thinking about our bonus structure, right, particularly in this early childhood phase, is that families, let's say they go and get an early learning screening and submit paperwork that shows they got an early learning screening, they can get an additional $25 in their account. Or, so that's for the older kids. If it's with the babies, it's the well baby checkup. On the financial health track, this would be participating in different financial literacy classes or courses. For example, we hosted Money Action Day, which was a Saturday virtual during the pandemic, where families could come and engage with a whole network, of community partners to really hone into, how do I maximize my account? How do I use this account? Beyond that, it was also around the broader financial capability and thinking around retirement, home ownership, other types of sort of wealth and asset building that families could think about or be introduced to as different possibilities that also align with their college savings account. So you have to hear Mayor Carter, say that, if we would have just deposited the $50, yes, that would have been a good success. But really, this is about how using it as a mechanism and a vehicle for building relationships with families, getting families connected to resources, being in partnership with them, in the early days of the children's lives. And, our mantra sort of at the city of St. Paul is that we want to build a city that works for all of us. And for us, it is really about the financial, household financial security and thinking about sort of the wealth and asset building, the children. It can be imbued, sort of within children and their families as, we're looking for different types of economic policy that, set our community off, on a different and better foot. Maybe the last thing I'll mention is just with our college savings account program, we do lots of different engagement, out in the community. And during COVID, we did a drive-through baby shower as one way for folks who could pre-register for the program, be introduced to it, have different types of drawings, for car seats and those sort of things. And we have an ambassadors program, which is 26 different community members who are championing the program, day in, day out, in their communities. And then we have a champions program of folks who, you could be a parent, you could be an elected official, you could be a doctor, you could be a person who works as a bank teller. Anyone who's supportive of this program could basically sign a college-bound champions card, and we post it, frequently, on our website. So for us, this is really all hands on deck, community-wide, citywide effort to really say that we're going to bet on our children, we're going to bet on our families, and we know that CSAs hold a lot of future for mobilizing a different imagination of what's possible. With that, I'll take a pause there.
Thank you so much, Munir. That is really inspiring, and I'm especially wishing I could be there for the drive-through baby showers that really connect the community. I would like to now turn to my neighbor here in Durham, North Carolina, Christina McLean, to share with you her and her daughter Lauren's personal experience with the Book Babies Bright Futures savings account. Welcome, Christina.
Hey, Ginger, thank you. So first, I just want to give honor to God for being here today. I want to thank CGLR for having this platform to discuss this topic. I want to thank Ginger from Book Harvest for allowing me to be here, and my fellow panelists. Book Babies Bright Futures is nothing short of a blessing from God. Being a part of this work as a parent is so rewarding and such an honor to know that Book Harvest is always so strategic and takes the time to look at the research, and find ways to be impactful by investing in the lives of our children's futures, brings so much hope that our world can become overtaken by good and positive things. This investment in children's education and careers not only benefits the children, but us as parents as well. This investment shows children that there are people in addition to their family that care about their futures and want to invest in them because they as well see their potential, greatness, and know that they will make such a powerful impact in the world. This will also show children the importance of investing. They will be able to reflect throughout their journey and see how receiving $100 up until they were 5 years old has now grown and how much it has grown by the time they become 18. This investment shows parents that it is not too late for them to invest in their children's future and their potential that they always knew would help change the world. It also shows parents that you do not have to be rich or wealthy to be able to start saving. You can save $10 a month, $100 a year, whatever you can afford will still make a positive impact in your child's future education. Although I come from a foundation of having financial background, that is only a portion of who I am. I still go through trials and tribulations as we all do. So receiving that email about Bright Futures and knowing that they have a new program that would assist me in investing in my daughter Lauren's future education and career was surreal. Knowing that Lauren could still be a part of this, even as an inaugural member, was beyond mind-blowing. When I read the email again, it was already a surreal moment, but when I saw that the investment was $500, I did not see $500. I saw $5,000. I saw $50,000. I saw $500,000. I even saw $5 million. I saw a seed that God gave me that if I watered it and nurtured it, and it will grow and harvest into a crop that would help me fund my daughter's future education. Bright Futures gives parents inspiration, encouragement, and the push to just go do it. I'm still in awe of Book Harvest after almost 10 years of being involved. It never ceases to amaze me on their willingness to create meaningful missions, goals, and moments that will and have been transforming the lives of children since birth. I pray that God continues to use and highlight Book Harvest, Book Babies, Bright Futures, as well as all the other programs that will become from this organization, and that it will expand throughout the world. Book Harvest shines a light in our area, which is ever so bright. I would like to thank everyone that ever was, currently is, and is to become connected to Book Harvest on continuing to advance this organization forward. To the parents and children of this great organization, I would like to give a special thank you. Without parents like you and I becoming and allowing our children to be a part of this organization, there would be no continuation of this magnificent work. Our children will one day become the next Book Harvest CEO, board member, administrator, staff member, sponsor, consultant, or volunteer who keeps the light ablazing by continuing to do the good and positive things. This cycle will always bring hope throughout the world. And I personally cannot wait to not only see my daughter, but all of our children as they continue to grow and their moment finally arises. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Just amazing. I'm so grateful for your personal reflections on what it's like to be a part of a children's savings account program. I would love to now turn our attention to Colleen Quinn to share with us a statewide CSA model in Maine, the Alphonse Scholarship Program. Colleen?
Great. Thanks, Ginger. And it's a lot to follow, Christina, let me tell you. When you were reading my profile earlier on, you mentioned that I was an attorney in a former life. And as you can tell from Christina's really wonderful experience with the Book Harvest program and the difference it's made for her and her family, you can tell that this is work that really is profoundly impactful and deeply meaningful to those of us involved in it. So let me take just a minute and tell you about the My Alphon Grant Program. I think Sarah's putting a note in the chat right now that you've heard it also referred to as the Harold Alphon College Challenge, or HACC. So I think when Willy and Carl both talked, they may have referenced it that way. So it's the same program. We adjusted the name a couple of years ago. We wanted to expand college to include a lot of opportunities beyond high school. And the word challenge was confusing to families. So we wanted to make clear this was something for everybody. So our program is statewide, universal, automatic at birth. We are, I believe, the first state in the nation to do this. We are also, like the Book Harvest program, we invest $500 for every Maine baby who's born. And to date, as you heard, it's about 130,000 Maine children who have the grant. Just for a sense of context, Maine has about 12,000 babies born a year. So we're geographically a really pretty large state, but our overall population is like 1.3, 1.4 million, and it's about 12,000 babies born a year. The foundation has invested about $65 million for these children, and families themselves have contributed about just under 150 million more of their own. Now that's a staggering amount of money in a state like Maine, which is not a particularly wealthy state. Most families are putting in, $250 to $400 a year total into those contributions. For us, it's super exciting that all of those investments combined from the foundation, from families, from matching grants, and then invested in the marketplace is actually today worth about $351 million for those 130,000 kids. Now, the impetus behind the program is from Mr. Harold Alphon, who is a noted Maine businessman and philanthropist. And his real vision was at both what I often call both a micro and a macro level. And what I mean by that is he wanted to make sure that individual Maine children had the opportunity that higher education brings. And he also wanted to support the future prosperity of Maine through a more educated workforce. So how our program works is I run a two-person nonprofit organization, the Alphon Scholarship Foundation. We get all of our resources, both for the grants and for operations, from the Harold Alphon Foundation, which is a private philanthropic organization, a private family foundation. And then we work with FAME, the Finance Authority of Maine, which is a quasi-state agency. They help to administer the program. So they get all the records around the births, they track the value of the grants, et cetera. At ASF, we have an omnibus account that's a single large 529 account that we opened on behalf of all those babies, and we invest by monthly cohort so that all the babies born in January of 2022, we invest $500 for each of them, and then we invest all the monies, for babies born in February of 22, et cetera. We, like with Patty, we communicate very regularly with families. Every quarter, they get a communication from us that shows the current value of the grant so they can see it's changing, hopefully growth in the market over time. That also shares a lot of other information with families. And we have a pretty robust website that I think Sarah's going to put in the chat that has tips and information, resources, things that parents can refer to and use as their child grows. So I mentioned that we are a two-person nonprofit. So there are two of us and 130,000 Maine children. And so to make the program work and to really make sure we're connecting with families, partnerships are super important, right? We're by definition going to be a low-touch model. So those partnerships are important. We work with hospitals right from the time a child is born so that a new mom in the hospital knows right away about the Alphon grant. We work with family serving organizations like Head Start programs, libraries, a lot of different organizations in Maine that work with new Mainers or folks in the immigrant refugee community to make sure that they're aware of the grant. We work with businesses, or I really should say employers of all kinds across the state to encourage payroll deduction for college savings. I don't think I mentioned that if families want to make their own contribution, they open their own companion account, and then we can link the two of them together. And then very importantly, we work with state agencies. We've done a decent amount of work with the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, some of that has gone on the back burner the last year or two during the pandemic. Their plates were pretty full meeting immediate needs of families. But they remain really committed to and interested in what we're doing and eager to help support it. We've worked particularly closely with the Maine Department of Education. So we have among the tools and resources on our website or that we've made available, there's a program aimed at kindergarten students, another one for pre-K through grade 2, and then a kind of planning and aspirations tool that we developed for middle school students. All of those were developed by us. And then we worked with the Maine Department of Education to make sure that they were aligned with the Maine learning results, which are the state learning standards. So it makes it an easy off-the-shelf kind of a resource for families as well as for teachers. And then the last thing that I wanted to say in the kind of why it matters, and I know Carl spoke to this as have other folks, but you know, I think Willy's language that he uses about the college-bound identity, and in particular the phrase about hope in tangible form, that really is what this is about. I mean, there's definitely a goal for our program around boosting educational attainment in Maine, but it's also very much focused on individual kids and those opportunities. And so when I talked before about the micro and macro, the other way that I often think about and describe our program is it has both practical and aspirational benefits. So that $500 is real money in a real account that's invested for these kids. And it has that aspirational benefit, that college-bound identity, the difference it makes when someone tells you they believe in your child's future, that they think your child matters and has value, and they want to see good things happen for your child. And, you know, I'm not going to be ever able to say it more eloquently or passionately than Christina did, but you heard her words and the way that she described the impact of these programs for her and for her family. And that's really very much what this is all about. So thanks again for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you to all 4 of our discussants for your sharing of CSAs in your worlds. Having case studies of this field really helps bring it to life. And it really is great for me to see the range of CSAs from rural to urban, from nonprofit to municipal to statewide, and to hear about them from different perspectives. And so what we'd like to do now, before we turn to questions from today's attendees, and we have a bunch of them, I would like to ask the 4 of you and our 2 presenters, Carl and Willy, to bring up your cameras, come back on. And I have a couple of questions for you to reflect on in an informal conversation. I want to just note that I heard an incredibly recurring theme throughout this past hour of hope. The word aspirations is in the title of this webinar. Everybody spoke of it, including wonderfully Willy, had some measurable evidence-based ways to get at hope. And I'm hearing that hope is really a big, powerful driver in this work that also delivers a very tangible benefit, which is a nice combination. And I want to get a little deeper into the inspiration behind this work that each of you is advancing in your community. I'd love to hear a little more about your personal inspiration and your why in doing this work. Anybody want to kick this off?
Well, I'll jump in super quickly to say that, again, despite an ill-fated career as an attorney early on, I've been working to create opportunity for Maine kids through access to higher education for the past 20 plus years. So I did it initially at a traditional scholarship program. It was a wonderful, wonderful program, focused a lot on first-generation kids, really focused on providing opportunities and resources to kids that they might not otherwise tap into. But it was a traditional scholarship program that therefore kind of recognized kids who had already done all the things you're supposed to do, and you had wonderful applicants and could only pick a small number, right? So Patty's nodding your head. She knows what that's like with the scholarships from a community foundation. So to do this work that's working with families, right from literally the very moments that their child enters this world, and to provide, again, that sense of hope for the future, there's just really, it's extraordinarily meaningful and rewarding. And when I see now my former Mitchell scholars who have babies, and so talk about a 2-gen approach, and so then, you know, now I get to provide the Alphon grant to them, and that's a pretty special thing.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I'd say that I think the Community Foundation is recognized for a very long time that the barriers to school achievement, academic achievement, and post-secondary success are not limited to a financial barrier. I just heard a statistic that 26% of Indiana residents don't believe that any post-secondary education is necessary. We're a part of the Rust Belt where for decades, a high school education could sustain a livable wage, and that's not the case anymore. So our uphill climb in administering our scholarships and reaching low-income families is not just a matter of delivering financial aid, but it is impacting a culture and an understanding that post-secondary education is attainable, it's worthwhile, educational achievement is doable and worthwhile. So, for years, the Community Foundation even mused, wouldn't it be great to give a fourth grader a scholarship when they learned how to read? And it was then with the advent of the CSA program that was introduced by RY in 2013, we realized there's a platform to do this. We are able, it gives us an opportunity to talk to parents, it gives parents an opportunity to talk to kids. And again, those are just some of the barriers to helping kids realize the benefit of education.
Thank you, Patty. Any other thoughts from our panelists?
I don't want to step on anybody, so if anybody else has something to say, please. But if not,
You can go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay. I'll try. So when we say inspiration, I really think, I grew up poor, blah, 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 and so that's the reason why I got into this. The thing that I can say most compelling for supporting it in some ways is that I really think this matters for changing poverty and changing kids' futures and in the bigger scope of things and how it fits into the bigger picture. So what I wanted to say was that even though we talk about aspirations, and it's easier for a title, I understand that, and I use it too at times, we're really talking about giving kids tangible hope. Poor kids dream, poor kids have aspirations. They just don't feel real, right? They don't have a strategy for achieving them that's realistic for them. And so I give one quick example. When I was a kid, my mother and I would walk to neighborhoods where they had fancier homes and better homes and dream of one day being there. And that kind of carried us through the day. It was very useful for us to have that kind of hope, but really have no strategy for how to get there and how to achieve that. And so it didn't change behavior because it was just something that was almost a mental relief, right? Which is really important for poor people. But what the CSA program does, it gives them tangible hope. That is a true strategy, particularly once we start thinking about Patty and others and how we get money into these accounts for these poor kids, and not just them contributing, but when the whole community starts thinking about ways to put money in these accounts, now we're giving them a true pathway to achieving that dream of college. That Mitt Romney said, just borrow the money off your parents. Like it was that tangible to him to go to college. We're trying to give poor kids that same sense. And then no shocking, their behaviors change and they start investing in school because it's a real pathway that matters to them. I'll stop.
Everybody kind of said stuff that was so great. I would just say from my perspective, from the parent perspective, I grew up from a middle-class family. So, it's like a up and down, like you have something, but you still don't have enough because they feel like you have too much still when you're still struggling in areas. So as I had children, we get to a certain age where we learn these financial strategies and tools and things like that. But I think the push is to learn them earlier and earlier and earlier, because if the things that my parents learned as they got older, if they would have known when they were younger, it could have helped boost us even further than we have gotten. And I thank my parents because we've all done great. But as a parent, creating a foundation for my own children, I want them instilled with that financial stuff like now, like at birth, like when I push them out, I want them to know that, they can have a future, that, these are the things that we can do to build you up. And it's not always that, it's not always a lack of education, because as I said, I have the financial background and I understand the importance of school and all of that stuff, but it does still come into play where parents know the goals that they want for their kids, but it's hard for them to achieve them and go forward with them because they don't have the financial resources. So their children have the understanding